It's 2035. Paul, what was the real turning point for you?
The real turning point was when there were 1,700 scuba divers in Tompkins County who were able to dive in Cayuga Lake. The nitrogen was no longer being fed in. The zebra mussels were no longer all over the bottom of the lake. The clarity of the water was now 30-foot visibility instead of 5-foot visibility. And Stewart Park actually had swimming like it did in 1954 as compared to significant defecations in the water that it had then. So then I could still scuba dive, okay, and I could enjoy it a lot more. The other thing is that the unity that people had talked about as not being visible was not only visible, but there was common ground about the vision of the climate being managed by everyone. And so NYSEG and everyone else in the power company was able to partition their data into groups like Ithaca or the town of Ithaca or Tompkins County or the central region, any way that it needed to be sorted so these things could be measured. And that everyone, someone else, I forgot who it was, who said, I couldn't see that everyone else was working. Everyone had the same common vision because the regulations in the next few years migrated so that corporations had to be sustainably focused and they had to have a corporate sustainability plan that would bring them to zero in date X. And that was being committed to by them and transparently monitored in public so everyone could see the actions moving forward. And the third thing, which would probably be the first, is that I finished my complete audit on my house and transformation from kilowatt hours of coal and whatever NYSEG sends us to kilowatt hours of solar, and getting NYSEG to migrate my bill to be a sustainable bill so that I could actually see the difference in how much is now green and how much is still crap. And it would increase so that I would have 100% green, and I would be able to measure that myself. And again, that would be fed into the same common thing. So I'm kind of talking like a China government's total access to everything by everyone. So no privacy at all, except it's totally the data access, so that the city of Ithaca can't compromise the data that they get from NYSEG to do secondary things like compare usages of power to bad things or something like that. That there's independence in the commitments. So that's about enough. But my scuba diving is number one, but that's just the excuse to get all these things done.
That's right. So I guess I have a lot of connected but disconnected thoughts on that. I think first and foremost for me is my children are optimistic about their future. My children are young adults. At that point, they will be middle-aged, believe it or not. And they feel optimistic that life is going to continue to be good for them. Secondly, I have grandchildren by then, and I can take my grandchildren out and introduce them to nature in the way that I was introduced to nature, hiking and biking and spending a lot of time in the woods, and really getting comfortable in nature and not feeling like nature is threatening, which I think years ago we felt. I think in 2035, I can walk through the woods without a bag of water on my back, and I can kneel down by a creek and I can drink out of it like I used to when I was a child. Wild animals, I don't have to worry about whether they're going to exist anymore. They've come back in abundance. The birds are at my feeder, and maybe not living quite so close to me as they seem to feel like they have to now. I see a lot more wildlife around my home than I used to, and that encroachment I don't think is good for them. And I think on a more global scale, the disparities in the quality of life that people experience here in our country, in the United States, have hopefully been eliminated, but at least have reconciled in a way where everybody is living in a better space than they were 15 years ago.
So I would echo a lot of what was just said. In addition to my kids feeling optimistic about the future, I would feel optimistic about their future. And when I kick off, things are going to keep getting worse. I tend to be more pessimistic. I don't think 2035 is going to be any better. I expect it to be worse, even if we do everything we can right now. So that's what I understand of the curve of effects that we're having on the global system. So unfortunately, I think things are going to be a fair bit worse, but that we at least know that we've done everything we can so that maybe 15, 20 years from then, things will be better. So that we at least are all sort of, holding hands together or something and saying, okay, hang on, it's getting better now. So I think that we maybe in 2035 have hit the peak of what is the worst to come. That would be, to me, the best case scenario. And we're, looking at the other side at that point. And then as well, the inequalities, so that we have, by 2035, we have a clear change in the income gap nationally and internationally, so that we can, see that not just the income gap, but the haves and have-nots kind of across the world are more balanced out, so that we don't have a scenario where some people are in bunkers full of food and others are starving, but that everyone is suffering together and also helping each other out. Here in Ithaca, I think it's possible to see some of those effects that Paul was talking about. So yeah, clearer water, those kind of things I think could happen on a shorter time scale if we act. And also, again, the inequalities, so that we have housing that is adequate for everybody. Everybody has adequate housing. And the worst case scenarios of housing around the county are not that much worse than the best case scenarios of what we see around the county. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. For me, the thing that really first came to mind in thinking about what 2035 could look like if we all work together and rowed in the same direction, is that our grandkids at that point would actually feel okay about their having kids. Our grandkids are we have 3, and they're well on their way to being quote unquote grown up. They're either in high school or even in college, and I just know that there's a lot of anxiety that they were feeling back in 2021, and a lot of stress and worry. And in 2035, because we have been somewhat successful, if not largely successful, that level of stress has been significantly reduced, and to the point where they feel okay. They have felt okay now about having their own families. So that's the thing that first came to mind for me in thinking about where I would hope to be in 2035. Also, the thing that you said, Diane, about being able to be outside, to be walking through the woods, to be in nature and a sense of reconnection to that, and not feeling in conflict with nature, but rather in harmony. There's a sense of rebirth that comes with that for me has been really deeply felt. And I think that has been made a deep impression on my sense of where we are in the world, and in this sense of having been so stratified in terms of our access to resources, and a sense of despair about the previous level of inequality. Things aren't perfect, far from it, but just the idea that we've made the kind of progress we have, and showing that we don't have to just be objects of history getting pushed along in directions that we don't want to be pushed in, but in fact have become subjects in history, and intentionally together have helped to ease that sense of experience of stratification and inequality has also been really heartening. Again, we have a long ways to go here in 2035, but the fact that we have been able to collectively make that progress together is energizing for going forward. I'm hoping that in 2035 we're still meeting monthly at TCCPI, but the conversation has shifted into, now that we've escaped that the pull of gravity, that felt like such a crisis. Where can we go now that we've been released from that sense of catastrophe? How much further can we soar in terms of realizing a vision that we all so desperately wanted to have, and can now see more clearly? And so the tone of our conversations on a monthly basis have been really reinvigorated, really re-energized because of the progress that we have been able to make, and a sense of excitement about where we can go even further. So here's to meeting monthly in TCCPI from now until 2035 and beyond. So those are the kinds of thoughts that I had in thinking about this, and also in listening to what you folks had to say. I had no idea, Paul, that you were a scuba diver, so that's been a revelation.
Yeah, and just at what you just said, Peter, about escaping the sense of gravity, I think was your words. Jeff Bezos spent $15 million to get 4 people up for 4 minutes to be weightless. And for $2,000, you can get trained and have equipment to go underwater and to progressively, day by day, feel total weightlessness, hear nothing, have absolute pressure on your body from the water because of the compression at depth. And you can go inside, which is, for me, the biggest beauty of scuba diving, is not being drawn outward all the time to stuff, but being drawn inward to remember peace and quiet and calm, at which, I get to a better place in every time I dive than they did in 4 minutes. And it ends up costing me, $15 a trip for an hour of being weightless. It doesn't get any better than that for me, but being able to sip water from a stream that's clear in 20 is pretty elegant, and being able to soar more high and have goals be even grander than what we can imagine now, which is, minimizing pain, and we'd be able to maximize benefit maybe easier or sooner then. We're right at the, in math, it was called the minimax point. You're sitting where you're on the top of a horse, and you can fall or you can ride, but it's tough work on your hips to be able to stay balanced, and we're just barely staying balanced. Yeah, I'm the scuba diver. Anytime you want to come. can get you that experience.
Really interesting. Yeah, and so I also just flashed on My Octopus Teacher. If you haven't seen that, it's on Netflix. It's really well worth watching because there's a sense, really almost magical sense of connection that documentary conveys about being integrated into the world underwater. In this case, in the waters off the coast of South Africa.
Yeah.
So I was also thinking about that as I was listening to all of you talk.
So I've seen that, Peter, and it's just a stunningly wonderful and beautiful story. Really, really unique. It's a unique movie.